Wonderful. It's 10 o'clock, so I think we can just start. Welcome everyone. Welcome at this webinar, Dutch Tech for Cybersecurity in Africa. My name is Josephine Demstra. I'm the country director of the TRAIDE program here in Rwanda, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all for this online event. Hopefully next year we can do this offline again, but for now we kindly welcome you to this Zoom session. Before we dive into the content, I would like to go over a few practicalities to help us make this a very smooth webinar today. Please note that the recording is in progress, so that the session is being recorded. It's good to mention that all the attendees, because we feel that this topic of cybersecurity can sometimes be a little bit of a sensitive topic. We felt that it would be good for the attendant to participate anonymously. So that is also, therefore you don't see the other attendees. And please note that when you write any questions via the chat or the Q&A box, you can actually mark that you would like to see to be viewed either anonymously or with your full name. So that is up to you. And of course, we very much welcome you to, after or during the presentations or whenever something pops up, please feel free to share your thoughts, your questions, your comments or suggestions in the chat and the Q&A box. And lastly, it's good to mention that the cameras and the microphones are off. This event, this online event today, it is part of the TRAIDE program, and it's sponsored by the Netherlands Embassy here in Rwanda, in Kigali. And before we dive to the actual topic that you came for, the cybersecurity, I wanted to briefly tell you a little bit about the TRAIDE program, of which this webinar is part. So the TRAIDE Foundation, we support the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to operationalize their agenda, moving from an aid-based relationship to more trade-based relationship. And our program has three main objectives. The first one is that we would like, or that we aim to increase the Dutch investments in and trade with African countries. The second one is that we actively support Dutch businesses that are already working in different African countries, amongst others here in Rwanda. And our final objective or aim is to ensure and support businesses to implement their investments in a socially and environmentally responsible way. We do this in different sectors on different topics. So for example, in horticulture, in the energy sector, and today we are focusing on digitalization and cybersecurity specifically. So I'm very glad that as part of this TRAIDE program, we have so many people that are interested in this topic, and very much looking forward to learn more together with you. Before the start, and before I say a little bit about the program that we have, I would like to give the word to the ambassador of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to Rwanda, Mr. Matthijs Wolters. So please, Ambassador, I would kindly ask you to start this webinar, or kick this webinar off with a few welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Josephine. Good morning, everyone participating in this webinar. And first of all, let me thank Josephine and her colleagues of the TRAIDE program to organize this. It's a new topic for us, but it's an important one. And of course, we are very glad to see that so many of you have decided to join us today in this event on Dutch tech and cybersecurity for the financial sector. I'm happy to see quite a few companies and financial institutions throughout the region who join us. And of course, I'm looking forward to the remarks and the observation of our panel of speakers, all of whom have a very strong track record in the topic of cybersecurity, which we discussed today. Well, just to start with stating the obvious maybe, but of course, digitalization is transforming the world in which we live and in which we work at an incredible pace. This has only been accelerated by the COVID pandemic. Indeed, here in Rwanda, it's almost unheard of when you try to pay with cash. as people request you to pay with mobile money or other types of electronic money. The internet and ICT services, in other words, have changed the way in which we interact, in which we communicate and learn. And that's true for every country. It's also a big economic opportunity. Investing in the digital economy will help and will define actually the ability of a country and of companies to succeed in our global marketplace in which we live. And it has to be said that the growth in the digital economy has quickly outpaced over the last maybe 2 decades already the growth of the overall economy. Rwanda is not an exception to that. Its ICT sector has been growing rapidly over the last 5 years, witnessing a growth of approximately 13% over the period 2014 to 18. And even if you may think what happened last year, even last year, it produced growth, being just about the only sector of the economy where actually growth took place in view of the global pandemic. So how does this work? Rwanda is strongly dedicated to its digital transformation. It takes digitalization seriously as a driver of economic growth and also as a way to reduce poverty in the country. It encourages the use of ICT as a tool for employment and for innovation. And it offers ICT companies favorable tax incentives to set up business here and to try out and grow. Many government services are already online. Whenever you visit one of the national parks here, you need to go through their online platform. And that's true for many other services the government offers to its citizens. In other words, Rwanda has the ambition to be an important ICT hub and a center of excellence in the region. And that coincides with the ambition we, as the Netherlands, have in our development cooperation policy and in our policy of moving from aid to trade. Not that long ago, our Minister for Foreign Trade and Development Cooperation signed off a new document called the Digital Agenda, which describes the opportunities of digital technologies for sustainable and inclusive economic development. And this needs to be seen in its context and linked to other sectors in the economy. In our case here, we see clear linkages for ICT to what we aim for, which is better functioning chain of added value for horticultural products and everything that comes with it, like logistics, infrastructure, energy, and market information. On every of these topics, ICT has its role. Regrettably, and that's today's topics in a way, of course, this huge shift and growth of the digital world has also attracted unwanted attention in the form of cybercrime. Today, we'll delve into this because we need to address that. Without good focus on the risks, it's difficult to make it all work. Cyber criminals are exploiting weaknesses in cybersecurity capacity and do not hesitate, as you all know, to attack a vital digital infrastructure. I would haste to say that this is a global phenomenon. Wherever cybersecurity capacity is falling behind, institutions regrettably become the targets of cyber criminals. That was the case in October last year when Uganda's telecom and banking sector were confronted with a crisis due to a major hack which compromised its mobile money network. And of course, as I already mentioned, like in Rwanda, in Uganda as well, the mobile money network has increased significance incredibly during the pandemic. And then, of course, more closer to home for us, a very well-known cyber attack took place against the University of Maastricht a bit later in the year. That was in December 2020, when the entire system of the university was subject of a ransomware attack. And the university had to pull down basically all its ICT systems to limit the damage. Of course, these are all very, very major events, and regrettably, there are many, many more examples. So we need to confront this. The Netherlands has done so since 2013, when it's presented its first cybersecurity strategy, which has since been updated twice. The strategy adheres to a number of principles, which are of which a few of which I would like to mention, because they are core to the strategy, and also in a way core to what we intend to do today. First of all, cybersecurity is very much part and parcel of national security. We need those interlinkages to take into account. It's not just an individual cybersecurity risk for an individual company. It easily affects everything of your national security infrastructure. Then, security in the digital domain can only be shaped, we feel, in cooperation with the private sector. That's why we meet here today in this format. Public-private cooperation is indeed the basis of what the Netherlands in its strategy has formulated as its main tools to tackle the issue. Equally important in this sense is international cooperation. By its very nature, of course, the digital domain is not limited to national boundaries. It is probably the most transnational form of crime you can imagine. So international cooperation is of the essence, and that's also what we aim for. So governments and companies alike will need to address the digital vulnerabilities that exist within their infrastructures in order to adequately respond to the threats. And business has grown around this challenge, of course. I'm very pleased to see today that several Dutch companies with a wealth of expertise on this will share with us their thoughts and their observations. In real life, they provide products and services that will help us prevent cybercrime from happening. So I'm very pleased to open this event where the speakers will introduce their themes and topics on cybersecurity, and where we can connect with African organizations, African businesses with their real life challenges. I really hope for a very fruitful discussion, and I hope you'll enjoy this webinar. I'm sure I will enjoy it as much as you will do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Josephine.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I think this was a great way to set the scene for this topic and also for the webinar today. Because we'll see on this slide, so we have a very busy day ahead. We have quite a number of speakers today, all Dutch businesses working on various topics that touch upon cybersecurity and of the all the different aspects that this topic has, as the ambassador also explained to us just now. I think it's just it's good to know that the goal of this webinar is to inform you about the latest trends and developments in cybersecurity, and we hope that by giving you all these different trends, these different businesses, and seeing what they are doing, also a little bit of an idea or give us an idea of what we feel is important to you, and what may be sub-themes, subtopics that we can dive in further in the remainder of our program. I won't say much more. I think it's good because we have a lot of speakers today. It's good to just directly go into the first topic, the first speaker of today, which is Mrs. Melanie Rieback from Radically Open Security. She's the CEO and the co-founder. And Melanie, I would kindly ask you to unmute yourself and please take the floor.
Great, thank you so much. So my name is Melanie Rieback, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Radically Open Security. We are a 7-year-old social enterprise in the computer security consultancy space. That being said, we are primarily a penetration testing company. So we have roughly 40 people working at our company. And we've had, I would say, somewhere between 100 and 150 customers, including Google, Mozilla, Wikimedia Foundation. In the Netherlands, we also tested the Corona Melder for the Dutch Ministry of Health. The European Commission also hired us to pen test other national COVID contact tracing apps like Immuni in Italy, Protogo in Poland, Google Apple exposure notification API, and we're also busy right now with the EU digital vaccination passports. So we have really quite a number of high-profile customers and assignments. But what's even more interesting about us than that, I think, is the fact that we also do work on a nonprofit basis at cost price for nonprofits, NGOs, and civil society. And we also operate as a so-called nonprofit company, which means that we give 90% of our profits to charity. 90%, 90. The other 10% is our cash flow buffer. And we have given so far in the first 6 years of my company's existence, over €500,000 to the NLNet Foundation. And NLNet is a foundation that supports open source, digital rights, and anything for a free and open internet. So they support projects like GNU, Tor, Jitsi, DNSSEC, WireGuard, EFF, all projects that I'm sure you all would recognize. So, but that being said, yeah, we're a social enterprise, but we're a pen testing company. So some interesting things about the way that we pen test is in our workflow. We really emphasize openness and transparency in process. So before I started Radically Open Security, I was working in the cybercrime team at ING Bank. We occasionally dealt with consultancy companies, and they kind of had the tendency to like parachute in, act like black boxes, and then swoop out and then send a report in a large bill. At that time, I was I was working at the bank, and I was like, hey, if you guys are so elite, can I see what you're doing? Because I might actually learn something. First they were like, nah, it's too complicated, you wouldn't understand. At which point I was like, well, I used to be an assistant professor of computer science, specialized in computer security, so why don't you try me? But the main thing is, what I found was that the only way I was able to learn what they were doing was literally by standing next to them and physically looking over their shoulder, because that was sort of the one way they couldn't get rid of me. Truth be told, they were using the same open source as everyone else. I decided at that time to start my company because I thought, we can do this differently. So we work online, 100% online for the last 7 years, long before COVID made it trendy, which basically means that our office is online. We developed our own workflow called Peek Over Our Shoulder, which of course is inspired by the story that I just told you. And what we do is we add customers into our chat rooms, so the customers can actually observe our hackers and overhear every single conversation that they are having while we are busy breaking your stuff. Yeah, needless to say, that's very entertaining. It's also educational. And the whole point is really optimizing for knowledge transfer and transmitting the hacker mindset. Security, of course, is a process. It's a mindset. It is not just a set of patches that you get in a penetration test report. So that is why we've placed the emphasis in this way. Similarly, for us, it's actually really useful having the customer in the chat room with us, because you guys, if you're the customer, you are an oracle for us, you know, and this prevents us from wasting time on stupid things. So if we need, for example, if we want to know what does this function do, or can you please reboot the server, or are you using a strong password here, or, you know, these kinds of things, we can basically get quick answers from the developers and sysadmins, or even, you know, managers or security officers that choose to participate. So this openness and transparency is really a large part of what has made radically open security so successful over these last 7 years. Our business model, of course, has sort of been the other part of our success, in the sense that being a social enterprise, giving away our profits to charity also attracts some of the most idealistic hackers who also just so happen to be really good quality. Again, you don't get customers like Google and Corona Melder for no reason. So, you know, in that sense, I think that is what is unique, I think, about radically open security. I've been spending, I would say, in the last 3 years, a lot of time on spreading our business model, because the whole concept of nonprofit companies, you know, is not something that I think is only applicable to cybersecurity companies. So another sort of hobby side activity that I've been doing is 3 years ago, I also started a nonprofit startup incubator called Nonprofit Ventures. And we've actually been running programs where we've been putting founders through an incubation program and teaching them how to build companies that are similar to radically open security, and that they basically donate all of their profits to charity. So we have run basically programs with 2 cohorts of roughly a dozen founders so far. The first event was a startup boot camp in the Dutch island of Terschelling for 1 week. And then the second program was a 10-week online incubation program with Zoom. And what was actually quite interesting was we had a very international cohort with this one, because we were using Zoom. So we had fewer geographic restrictions. And we even included one social entrepreneur from Nairobi, from Kenya, this really lovely lady named Monica Muhoya, who was creating a company basically for women empowerment, organizing events, and she also donates her profits to combat menstrual poverty in rural Kenya. So anyhow, that being said, this, I guess, is really what I can tell you about my company, about our business model and how we operate. If any of you have any questions about ethical hacking or pen testing or security at large, I'm certainly happy to take them.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Melanie, and for sharing your insight and a little bit more about your company. And again, I would also kindly like to request everyone, if you have any questions, comments you would like to respond, please feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A below. And you can either do this by using your own name or by typing anonymously. There should be a box for that. Thank you very much, Melanie, and I think it would be good to head over to our second guest of today, Mr. Sander Swinkels, who is the CEO of DTACT. We have been practicing, so I hope this will work well. Sander, I would kindly give you the floor, and also I believe Titus, my colleague, has given you his control over the screen, so you should be able to move forward into the presentation. Thank you. We don't hear you. I see you're on mute. Perhaps I can unmute you. No. Can I suggest maybe Titus to give back the control of your screen back to Sander, so he can unmute himself. Yes.
Okay, now it should work.
Yes, we can hear you. Sorry, everyone, for waiting. Please continue.
Good morning. Great to be here. My name is Sander. I'm the CEO of DTACT, a Dutch company. Before I start, I don't want to talk too much about the product and the product offering, but more on the reason why the product actually was invented. My own experience is 18 years in the intelligence community and working in Silicon Valley for a company that worked a lot with intelligence and national security companies and the later stage financial services. And the challenges we always face is that the adversaries that we fight against are always ahead of the game. So whatever you invent, whatever measure you put in place, there's always something new in how they find a way to threat your business, society, et cetera, et cetera. DTACT is a Dutch company. We're not a social enterprise, but have a clear social mission. We support a lot of NGOs and in inclusiveness of neurodiverse talent. That's another thing. And before I go to the actual offering, let me explain the next slide, if that works.
You should be able to press on it. It's not working. Otherwise, maybe Titus, can you please go to the next slide?
Okay, the next one, please. So in terms of a storyline when the company started, what I faced in the intelligence community is that you can have the best analysts, you can have the best products, but the hardest challenge is that you get so much data, you get so much insights, and how do you actually process those data and get insights to it to react. When I came at DTACT, the guys have been building amazing tools. And when I talk about maturity stages in a second, from smart detection to even offensive tools and anything in between it. And one of the things they have been doing is experimenting a lot with, for example, honey networks, and put like an additional ring around a critical infrastructure of a bank, a government site, et cetera, et cetera. But what they face is that so much data would come in, and they had to experiment with all kinds of existing technology which was out there. For the tech people, think of Hadoop, think of Kafka, think of Kubernetes, think of Kibana, and all these kind of things. And actually what we faced is that the scale of data, especially if you talk about national scale, simply didn't do the job. It took too long to process the data, and that's why the founding team decided to build on technology to spin up data streaming and to spin it down when it's not necessary. So that was the first challenge. Like I said, there's new adversaries that try completely new things. And what I would inspire businesses with is that if you think of cybersecurity, think of maturity stages. So you can see them on the screen. It starts with detection. Everybody recognized in the past, we were simply talking about firewalls. We talked about virus scanners on the computers. And this is all about detecting. And most of the times detection is outdated, because as soon as new updates are available, there's new type of intrusions or new type of attacks that could happen. So if you go up in the maturity stages, you can think of defending actively, defending proactively, think of deception technology, hunting, and even offense. And if you think of deception, just think that spreading real information or false information to create like disruption on what people think they get. It's a technology that is currently explored in many ways as well. Outside these maturity stages, and I will talk a bit later on what are the measures for every stage, for every company, organization, bank or government, you can actually define, if you think of your crown jewels, for example, your PII data or trade secrets, you might want to have a different maturity stage to protect that part of the business than you want to do it for the regular business. The other thing with these maturity stages is that you could put a maturity stage of technology alongside it. So I talked about a simple detection and advanced detection, but everybody might know the mostly marketing terms of SOAR, XDR, SOC-SIEM, and all kinds of promises which vendors put in the market on how to respond to a lot of manual labor, et cetera, with the cherry on the pie, which is artificial intelligence. We can talk for hours about artificial intelligence to help automate some of the detection and response processes. But time is too short for this. And let me try to move to the next slide. So when I come to these maturity stages on detection, if you just look at your own organization, you can already see like what are the things that you might have in place already. And it doesn't matter if it's from whatever vendor, from us, but just trying to map out on what maturity stage you currently might be. So if you talk about detection, this is like the traditional office automation protection, the firewalls, Office 365, endpoint protection, IDS, and sensors on IT, OT, or IoT. And simply try to see if there's an intrusion and to get an alert. If you talk about defense, most organizations will have some kind of SOC or SIEM functionality, not or yes combined with an analytical platform to try to make sense of the data that you get in. But you can also think of like active cloud monitoring as a SaaS type of solution, NetFlow monitoring, the PCAPs, but also intel threat collection from whatever company that provides intelligence about active threats. Like for example, last year the SolarWinds, what we learn is that even that you get the threat intel, that it's sometimes hard to find out like what part of your organization actually might be affected and how much time does it take to patch or to secure this. When you go to proactive defense, you can actually think of a lot of things. I mentioned honey networks or honey farms to create like a fake ring around your infrastructure, try to lure people to see who's actually trying to attack you or what purpose they have trying to attack you. One concept we're exploring in the Netherlands right now is the first one on the slide, which is called a phishing lake. Everybody knows about phishing. There's internal phishing, there's external phishing to your employees or to your customers. And one of the concepts that is really proactive is to think of if multiple organizations would use a lake of sharing phishing and anti-phishing information, because we know it's a trend. It's almost like a wave that if they try one bank today, for sure they will try the next bank tomorrow, and it goes back in certain. So one of the things I would like to encourage you guys is to think of a concept to create a lake with each other and how you share certain data about phishing and know that a wave is coming in your way and respond to it. Beaconing, so exfiltration detection, if certain data get pulled out of your infrastructure, and it's even possible to tag certain data to track and trace it in the later stage, but that's the deception phase on to see where the data actually is going. And online footprint, external vulnerability scans. I haven't talked about the dark web information which is out there, but what I try to say here is that for every maturity stage that could be on a single part of your business, there's different measures you can put in place to think on how to protect your business and your customers. The last thing on these maturity stages is that it really doesn't matter what vendor you choose for every single piece of this. What will be the hard challenge for every organization, for our experience, how do you combine all these things that you put in place? And how do you get sense out of the threats that come to your way? From experience in a different part of the world, for example, Latin America, we noticed that for developing regions and growing regions into the digitalization, is that the clear benefit they have compared to the developing countries is that there might be less legacy in place and less measures in place. So there's actually a chance to skip some steps to be more ahead of the game than what we see in the developing world. Because just from experience, and I love the Dutch government, and we come from Holland, so we know them well, but sometimes the speed of thinking of how people should collaborate, what type of measures you can take in place, could take months or even years to decide how to do it. And I think that's a clear benefit for the region we talk about today in Africa, is that you might have some opportunity to do some things quicker and faster than what the developing world is doing. And then last but not least, the last slide, please, is just to share the way we think of mapping all these measures. We converted into a Lego brick strategy. So Raven is what does the data streaming and spins up the machines and spins it down. But it means that for every connection you want to make to whatever system or point solution you have, it should be simply to add it and to click it on top of it. If you think of data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, which we will not address today, you can simply convert the script into a brick, deploy it, hit save, and it would run. And all the enterprise about a topic which is clearly a big topic in Europe and other parts of the world lately is for example, data retention and GDPR. Make sure that once you connect to data sources, from the start, you ensure that you define not only who has the access right, what is the purpose, but also the retention scheme, and that you automatically remove it once it's no longer in use. Those are my final words. Happy to answer anything in the chat. And thank you so much for the attention.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sander, for your clear and very interesting story. And indeed, I'm very happy to see already some questions coming in. So also for the speakers, if there are any questions specifically directed to you, please feel free to already respond in the chat box to some of those questions. Because at the end of all the speakers, we will try to see if we have some more time for more questions that we can discuss plenary. Thank you. Let's move to the third speaker already. I'm sorry. It's Mr. Sjoerd Slot from Fraud Dynamics. We will try again to give you control over the screen. So please first try to see if you can maybe click with your mouse and then with the arrows on your board. But I see something is changing, and I hope that you have been doing this, Sjoerd. So please feel free to take the floor.
No, I think everything works excellent. So thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Sjoerd Slot, one of the co-founders for Dynamics. We're quite active, or mainly active in the banking and payment sector. I don't need to explain to you, there's a lot of cybersecurity issues going on right now, or have been actually going on for a long time already. And what the key issue is that you're going to have issues from the past, but how do you actually discover all the risks that you're having tomorrow? I think that's also in the proactiveness that Sander was mentioning. And what we've said is that if you know who's good and what good behavior is in your client base, that's actually when you can catch the bad behavior. So if you can actually find legitimate payment transactions, you can actually unravel the fraudulent or money laundering transactions that are out there. And I want to take you quickly through a bit of our thinking, and then also free to ask any questions that you might have. So I don't need to explain to you in the financial industry, it's all about integrity and it's about reducing friction. So making sure people can make the payments, can do their financial business, reducing costs, scaling your business because you want to be a profitable business as a bank or a payment processor. But at the same time, making sure that everybody keeps their money, there's no money flowing through your institution without the right approvals. So it's highly important for any financial institutions to maintain that integrity, to make sure that all the regulators, not only your national, but also international regulators are satisfied. And this is really on a global scale right now, whatever continent you're looking at, this is the challenge that financial institutions are facing. And the key questions then to ask there is that if you're looking at financial crime, whether it's fraud or money laundering, terrorist financing, or any type of illegitimate financial transactions, is how do you detect it? How do you find actually what's going on? Because there's a lot of things going on in your institution. And the second point is once you found it, or you think you find it, you need to investigate it, you need to follow up on it. How do you actually follow up on these things? And those are the two main challenges that any type of financial institution will face. And we think we've answered that because we've a long history in financial institutions and thought of ways to unravel this. The key question that you need to ask, what are your models and what are your processes? So not even looking directly into the technology yet, but how do you detect it? So what's your rules, what's your scenarios, what's your true and false positive rates? Those are the key issues that you want to address when you're addressing financial crime in a financial institution. At the same time, what's your process? So how do you investigate? How do you automate as much as possible? How do you make sure that you have your audit trails and your reporting out there? Just to make sure that you're both in control, but you're also doing this in an effective and efficient manner. And the thought process about this model and process is really slightly different than typical, I just want to buy a fraud solution or I want to buy a financial crime solution. And what we see as Fraud Dynamics is that, these two main pillars are the key things that you want to select and base your decisions on when you are making these types of decisions. For many years, I've been a consultant in a lot of financial institutions across the globe. And what you typically would see is that any financial institution would say, we're going to buy a fraud solution, or we're going to buy an anti-money laundering solution or a sanction solution. And what they actually meant is we're buying technology and we hope that that fulfills our need. And what we've always said is that you're mainly looking, again, you're looking for a good model and you're looking for a good process. And you want technologies to support those key capabilities, not the other way around, just getting a general technology in, and you hope that they have the right models and you have the right processes. I've been many years a consultant, you would always find there's a lot of customizations being done on the rules because you buy something from a vendor, but it doesn't really work on your data, doesn't work on your type of payments that you're getting through your type of clients. Same thing with the processes. You have different processes, different internal needs. And so it requires a lot of customization, especially what I've noticed, and I've worked myself several years in Africa. So you can buy anything from a vendor outside the continent, but the payments are extremely different. Customer behavior is extremely different. So it requires a lot of customization to get it to work properly and actually address the real needs that you have. And this is what we've said. If the key thing is, if you can buy a great software, you can buy a great engine, but if you don't have the right models, then you actually have nothing, because you're not going to detect anything, or you're going to have to run through so many alerts that you probably won't even see it by the time that you get to the real issue. So what we've done is we've said, well, we're going to build two solutions and are really specifically addressing this item. So you can keep your existing fraud or anti-money laundering solutions out there, replace them for whatever need you have. But we're going to make sure that as a financial institution, you get back into control by providing you the right analytics and providing you the right processes and workflow that you can automate, that you can create flexibility around for multiple processes in order for your analysts to really handle the alerts in the right manner, and actually to handle your clients in the right manner as well. And especially when it comes to the analytics, that a lot of times is expert-driven, consultancy-driven, and takes a long time to go from a basic raw data and the raw set of requirements to an actual model. And what we've done is we've actually automated that whole process. So we take in the raw data, we take in the raw regulatory or business objectives, and we actually generate the code that you can implement in your existing fraud or anti-money laundering solution. So you don't have to go through a big migration. We all know in financial institutions the complexity of IT migrations. So we say it's not so much about the software that you're running, it's much more about the logic and the models that you're running. So we actually have said we automated the whole machine learning part so that quickly you get models and rules and analytics that is customly generated for your data set, for your type of clients, your type of payments, your type of regulatory requirements. But as well, you get a great report with it in order for you to show to your auditors, your regulators, whoever is involved in making sure that this is a proper way to address your risks. And then again, what is really important is you can, I think Sander said similar things, is once you update all the software to address the latest risk, you're probably already behind before it even gets started. So the key thing is to be offensive, to be proactive in that sense. And the best way to do that actually is to look at your legitimate customers. If you look at game theory, we all know that a legitimate customer doesn't have a very strong incentive to change their behavior, whereas an illegitimate customer does have, they will directly adjust their behavior when you start taking measures. So if you can make your models around legitimate behavior, then you have a much more stronger case to detect fraud. And just to show you a bit, we've done this around the globe already. We typically reduce false positives by 80–85%, and we double the true positives or even more sometimes by looking at the legitimate behavior and therefore also finding a lot of fraud patterns that have not been detected yet. And again, not only just creating models in an automated way, but really making sure that it's auditable. You can take this to regulators. You can show this to anybody who's part of your internal governance, because we all know financial institutions, one part is covering the risk, the other part is covering the whole governance procedures that you have in place. And when we want to get started, I think quickly also understanding the complexity of environments in financial institutions, we always say, let's make sure that we start off with small pilots just to test if this really works. So you have all the internal backing. You can validate this on your data without making large investments, but you can test this in a small scale and then from there on you can expand it. So we already have presence in South Africa. We have initial conversation already in Tanzania. So we're actually looking very much forward to making this work. Yeah, very quickly what we do, who we are, and yeah, looking forward.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Stuart, for this clear presentation. And of course, for everyone also who has been asking in the chat, we will of course share all the contact details of each of the speakers, as well as the presentations and the recording of this webinar, so you can just refer back to it. Before we go to the next one, also again inviting everyone to please post your questions in the chat, because especially also for the presentation of Stuart, I know we have a lot of banks and financial institutions attending today, so I'm sure you have a couple of questions, so feel free to ask them. We will do the trick again with the sharing of the screen and the clicking, so I hope it will work. I'm happy to introduce you all to Andy Haxby. He is the director of Competa IT, as well as the board member of the Fair Trade Software Foundation. Please, Andy, you can take the floor.
Okay, thanks, and good morning. And the first thing I find is I can't control the, oh yes I can, yeah, it's just a little slow. Okay, I'm the director of Competa IT, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and I'll accept everybody's links, so if you want to get in touch with me, that's the best way to do it. And we're a software company who've been involved in collaboration with African companies and projects for more than 10 years now. Competa was founded as a spin-off from Shell Research in 1997, and we're a company who predominantly, our main business line is resourcing software projects for clients. Our clients are market leaders in finance, media, energy, government, and most of our work is supplying specialist staff for work on client projects. We also do consultancy work on project management, project scoping, how to run software projects, and also develop bespoke software in-house. And over the last 10 years, we've been increasingly involved in trading projects and knowledge transfer initiatives. Here in the Netherlands, we to meet the constantly changing demands of clients for new technologies, new management methods, we work a lot with international universities and have training programs for students. And so 10 years ago, we got interested in doing that in Africa as a sustainability initiative. So in 2011, we founded an organization called the Fair Trade Software Foundation, which aims to promote co-working between European and African ICT organizations. And under the Fair Trade Software banner, we've done a number of projects in Africa now, with the generic name Pamoja, which is together in Swahili. So code Pamoja, code together, for example. And these projects have been funded by a competitor and in some cases joint funded by the German government. And basically the focus has been on partnering with African companies to transfer knowledge and skills, to give African companies access to an insight into the way we run things in Europe, and help people design tech solutions for African problems, and help African companies increase their headcount and create employment. As a case study, I'd like to explain what we did with Code Pamoja. So Code Pamoja was or still is an initiative to get African graduates to collaborate in cross-border teams with mentors here in the Netherlands, and by working on real software projects. And we set the scheme up with 2 local partners in Nairobi who ran the facilities in Nairobi, so we didn't need to have any additional cost of sending or basing European people in Kenya. And over a 2-year period, we trained over 100 developers. the program still runs on a lower scale. In total, I think we've trained about 300 developers in Kenya, and 250 of those people have gone on to get jobs and employment with a variety of companies. And I'd like to explain why we did that. A lot of companies in Africa, both clients like a bank or also the tech companies, struggle to implement the same kind of complexity of ICT solution that we find easier here in Europe. And there's a reason for that. And that's that here in Europe, there's kind of a food chain. A company such as mine can hire a graduate, and we work on projects with clients that are multinational companies, oil companies or governments, telcos. And this gives an opportunity for relatively young junior staff to gain experience from more experienced mentors. And so there's kind of a transition between being a young graduate and being a fully trained professional ICT engineer. And what we saw in Africa when we first went there in 2010, 2011, was that a lot of African graduates don't get the opportunity to work in a big company alongside more experienced people. And so a lot of African ICT companies are started by graduates as an alternative to unemployment. And so the people running those companies have never had the experience of learning how larger, more experienced companies deal with problems, run projects, manage software projects. And so we wanted to create an environment to give people that experience. And so we ran a number of projects with clients here in Europe and also in Kenya, hired Kenyan graduates to work in our Kenyan partners' offices. But instead of splitting the projects up, so we'd have a team of developers here and a team in Kenya, we mixed the teams up. So the teams were virtual teams working online, with half the members here in the Netherlands and half the members in Kenya. And in that way, we were able to show the Kenyan guys how we approach software development. And it really was much more about the project's management and how you approach the art of software development rather than specific tech training. Because we found that with access to online training, a lot of people in Africa, are every bit as good as people here. It's just the experience of running complex projects that's lacking. And that was really successful. I thought it was interesting in Sjoerd's presentation before me. He mentioned generic tech, but domain-specific functionality. And I think that's something that people in Africa really need to think about. Because here's an example of what happened after Copamoja. One of the partner companies who helped host the facilities learned a lot about how to approach the problem of software development. We showed them the generic tech of how to do Scrum and Agile projects management, and then they use their domain-specific knowledge of Kenyan mobile networks and culture and local languages to implement a project for a major Kenyan bank. And so the guy in the middle here is an account manager from a bank. They had a problem that they wanted to sign up more people in rural areas. But their existing method of client acquisition didn't work because it takes too long to travel to remote areas and then back to the city, to the head office to make a proposal for a new client. So they wanted a handheld online means of identifying new customers, making offers for new bank accounts, and making proposals for microfinance if the accounts were managed properly. And this was hugely successful. Within 9 months, they signed up 750,000 new customers and distributed over 22 million in microfinance. And now I think the numbers are way larger. And this was really interesting because Steve's company, the guy on the left, they wouldn't have been able to build such a complex project or product without sharing the knowledge of our Dutch colleagues, with the understanding of project management. But also a project like this couldn't have been outsourced because it required a lot of local domain-specific knowledge. And so the collaboration between European and African tech people really can bring reward. And also in scaling organizations, this is the Kenyan ICT Authority. We trained 2 people in this group of people here, who then went on to train others in how to develop software. And again, that was very successful. And the Kenyan government have trained several hundred of their own tech staff, and the quality of their software has improved dramatically as a result of this. So, finally, I'd say that the concept of fair trade software is, but people think if it's a European company in business with tech people in Africa, everybody thinks immediately of offshore outsourcing. The African people think that the Europeans maybe can pay really good rates. The Europeans maybe think that Africa is a source of cheap labor. But I really don't think that's the way to approach collaboration between European and African companies in the tech sector. I think we can derive benefit by helping each other in different ways. And I think it's good to engage African talent on African problems, and there are ways to do this. And that's my presentation. And I'd also like to say, this leads on to Incentro, because I know Dennis is coming next. And I think that the slide I showed at the beginning, and where I mentioned that there's a lack of a food chain or opportunities for young Kenyan people or young African people to gain the knowledge that people here in Europe have access to. I think it's great that companies like Incentro are now setting up local offices in places like Nairobi, which really gives the local people there the opportunity to learn in a way that maybe a few years ago they didn't have access to. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andy, for your presentation, for this clear story. And also thank you for already introducing, indeed, our next guest. This makes my life easier. We have a slightly combined presentation, which I think will be even more interesting, of course, because in Central Africa and with Dennis de Weert, Andy, of course, already introduced him, so thank you for that. Is doing a presentation also together with DigiCloud Africa. So with Siswe Mabanga, he's a cloud and collaboration engineer at DigiCloud Africa. And then we have our final speaker of today, Nick Treurnicht. He is the professional collaboration engineer at DigiCloud Africa. Apologies. I think Titus will first give at least the control over his screen to Dennis. And then we look very much forward to your presentation. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Josephine, and thanks, Andy. Yeah, I think it's a good starting point. I think to say that we are a very proud member of the Fair Trade Software Foundation. Incentro is an IT consultancy firm started in the Netherlands 25 years ago. And myself, in the ambition to make more impact while using technology, met Andy, I think probably 6-7 years ago, and he was a great inspiration for me to set up the office here in Nairobi, and from here support the African market. So yeah, I wouldn't have been here without him, I think. Let's see if my controls work.
Dennis, I think there's something with the control, so I'll click through your slide, okay, and I'll give control to Sizwe afterwards, if that's okay.
Okay, perfect. So I think we can go to the next slide. Yes, so yeah, I said in Central Africa, we are an IT services provider, a Google Premier partner, the only one in the region. And it means that we use Google's technology, mostly cloud technology, to support customers throughout Africa. Currently, we support customers, enterprises in 26 countries in Africa from a Nairobi office. Even pre-pandemic, we were able to do most of our work online anyways. We have a team of all Kenyans, so we work together with the Dutch office for certain expertise, but most of the work is just done here locally. We support companies like the Central Bank of West African States, Ugandan Development Bank, Britain, SBM Bank with Google's cloud technology. So maybe to give you some context on cloud security, especially here in the region, and then I will hand over to Sizwe and Nick to tell you a bit more about the solutions that are available we support our customers with. So since the start of the pandemic, we can see that the cybercrime globally has increased with 600%. So as we all understand that working from home means that we need more access to our systems remotely, which also gives the opportunity to for cybercrime to penetrate our networks. So maybe the next slide. At the same time, we see that over Q1 in Kenya, the reported cybercrime has decreased by almost half. Very small print below, you can see that in Q1, it was about 28,000 cases in Kenya, where the quarter before was almost double, which is rather interesting. If we go to the next slide, that if we think that cybercrime is increasing substantially, though we detect way less, does that mean that we are doing much better in the region here, or does it mean that we don't detect what is going on in our systems? Next slide, please. So just a few examples. I think the first one you can see happened in Uganda last year, where 3.2 million was stolen by getting access to systems used by MTN and others. Systems were disrupted, and even till date, some systems have not been recovered fully. $4.4 million is paid in ransomware. I think it was end of last year, early this year, where the pipeline company in the US was attacked and disrupted their services. It was traced back to a single unused VPN connection that wasn't managed well. Can you imagine what a huge impact this has in a very small place of entry? 60,000 companies were hacked recently when there was a zero-day exploit in Microsoft Exchange, leaving them all to risk. And the biggest ransomware attack was just very recently, March this year, where $15 million has been taken from Acer. So as you can see, these are big companies, global companies, and the impact is very big when they have any security issues. Can we move to the next? So ransomware is the #1 security threat this year. If we look at the infiltration, it often comes through supply chain. So even if you have all your own systems secure and up to date, you find that they find a way up the chain. It can be dormant in your system for months, just collecting data before it actually activates. So even if you look at backup solutions, they could be corrupted long before you figured out that there's an issue. It is very profitable for bad actors, as you've seen in some examples. Sadly, there's a lot of payments going around, especially with cryptocurrency these days. It's easy to get anonymous payments for ransomware. And you don't have to be very specialized on the dark web. Ransomware kits are just available to buy, and almost every criminal can find their way in. Please go to the next. So if we would consider, are these companies that haven't managed their systems well? Often that is not the case. You can see in ransomware attacks that 75% of the companies that were infected by ransomware were running up-to-date endpoint protection. So it doesn't only say that you haven't managed your systems well, it could also be that you're just using technology that might not be of this day and age in order to protect you. Can we go to the next? So as we see, the way of we work has changed. The pandemic, sadly, here in the African region will probably force us to work from home a bit longer than we see in Europe. But even after that, we can be sure that we will work more in a hybrid environment. And it's a good thing. I believe we can see that 47% of the production has increased by working online. Probably we all feel we can get more out of a day if we don't get stuck in traffic. So we will not fully resume back to office settings. And we can also see that industry standards and regulations are insufficient to protect us against these security threats as we change the way we work. Next slide. So how do we protect our organizations? I think I leave the answer up to my friends at DigiCloud that can go into a few of these technologies that can be used to protect you a bit more. Can we please go to the next? So for a bit more details on ransomware, we have very short time today, but there's a webinar coming up on the 13th together with our partner Haiku, and we're going to explain a lot more about ransomware and how you can protect yourself from this. So with that, I think next slide, I think I will give it over to Nick.
Great, thanks, Dennis. So yeah, Titus, feel free to give me control of the slide. I think I do have control of it now. Let's just see if I can move to the next one. Great. So my name is Nick. I'm from DigiCloud Africa. I've had a good time so far listening to all the previous speakers from all the different companies. But yeah, think of DigiCloud Africa as Google's enablement arm in Africa. And what we're trying to do is just enable 1 billion users in Africa. We work through partners like Incentro. They're the biggest premier partner in Kenya. And we've had a really good time working with their Nairobi office for the past couple of years and growing the ecosystem. And maybe just to start off with, I think it was Sander from DTACT that mentioned developing countries don't have a large legacy environment. He was making a point around that, and I would totally agree with it. We see the same in Africa as an emerging market where not a lot of the African companies have got this tremendous legacy environment they're dragging behind them. And I feel like they almost have a easier way to move into the cloud with using Google Workspace. We are obviously at DigiCloud Africa, we are Google evangelists. So, when it comes to talks about security, we kind of put a Google flavor over that. We talk a lot about the Chrome browser as well. So not just Google's core products when it comes to Google Workspace, which is your Office collaboration suite. And Google not only protects their Workspace customers, but also just the general internet users using the Chrome browser. They scan 1 billion web pages every day for malicious content. All your data is encrypted in REST and in transit. They block about 10 million spam emails every single minute, and every browser tab is sandboxed. So kind of focusing on the browser, when you're working in the cloud, you're often working in the browser, and that's kind of where you want to work as well. And with the various tools that's given to the users, not all problems are a tech problem. Some problems are a user problem that gets resolved with training and change management and continual communication to them. You can give your users the most amazing tech tool, but if they're not trained on how to use that tool, or if they're not aware of the company's expectations of what they need to be doing in the tool, then they're not heading for success. And if you take phishing emails as an example of that, some of it relates to a technical configuration to make sure that you've got a solid technical configuration in place and you don't leave any room for phishing emails. But a big part of it is also just user awareness at the end of the day. Training around how to deal with phishing emails and how not to only protect your corporate account, but also your personal accounts. This is where, again, training and change management is absolutely crucial to the success of any technical implementation of a new system. Today, you'll hear us talk about some features about Google Workspace, largely focused into those 3 pillars you see in front of you, security and compliance controls built into the platform, along with a true cloud-based identity management system that you can integrate with pretty much anything these days. Endpoint management, meaning you can manage your entire fleet of Chrome browsers from anywhere from one admin panel, the same admin panel that you also manage your mobile devices from, or your tablets, your endpoint devices. Google regards any endpoint as anything that's running a Chrome browser. So whether it's Windows or Mac or Linux, you can control the endpoint Chrome browser on that particular device. So you're really controlling all devices that you are accessing your corporate information from. And then thirdly, enterprise video conferencing tool, all from within a link in the browser where meetings belong, so that when you're done, you can just close the browser tab. And what would a workspace or a security webinar be without talking about kind of collaboration? But single sign-on and SAML as a strategy, kind of bringing the conversation back to identity management, you would be fully integrated. So the question to ask is, are you fully integrated with your identity provider? When it comes to security, often your users are the weakest link, and focusing on that user's login and protecting that identity, you really want them to have a single identity that they sign in with everywhere, regardless of the application, whether it's a legacy on-prem application, whether it is more familiar cloud-based tools that we are using today, accessing it from a browser tab. You want them to access it through a single identity. And whether you're using Office 365 or whether you're using Google Workspace, you really want to focus on having that one corporate identity and protecting that with various layers of security, like two-step verification as well. Everything really starts with your identity provider, and then you integrate that through single sign-on and SAML applications into all of the applications that you are finishing to your users. And then DLP, data loss prevention, but not only for email. Google's DLP also scans your Drive documents. So again, when you're working in the browser, in the cloud, in Google Drive, and you're sharing and collaborating, whether it's internal or external collaboration, you also want to be scanning that content that people are sharing externally beyond your corporation for data loss prevention. And when you're working in the cloud, like you should be, you shouldn't just be scanning your emails for content, but as I've mentioned, also the documents. And Google has made this quite easy with what they call predefined content detectors. So you would set up your detectors, and this is normally the content that you are looking for, and then you would set up a rule. So when any of that content is detected, what would you like to do? Would you like to block the external sharing? Would you like to warn when people share externally before they can share it? Or would you just like to label it with some sort of a sensitive or secure label? There isn't really a magical button that you can just flick a switch and now you're DLP compliant and you're scanning for all sorts of content. It really does start with the company sitting down and deciding what type of content do we work with? What PII do we have that we would like to block from external sharing? Do we work with confidential contact details, whether it's email addresses or mobile numbers? Or do we work with medical information? Do we work with financial information? So kind of decide what it is that you'd like to block. Set up those detectors. And then set up the rules that either blocks or warns or prohibits anything from happening when that detector is triggered. And then in Google Workspace, you also have this investigation center where all investigation alerts goes to, and then you can very quickly and easy investigate which rules are being triggered, who triggered the rules, and then take action against it. Take back the sharing that was given externally so block an external email or stop it from being shared with a particular person. You can kind of take action against that. And then, we all want to be working fully in the cloud, and Google Workspace is a platform that allows you to fully work in the cloud. So choosing Google Workspace as your identity provider allows you to secure your users while having them work in the cloud, and then securing all of those various endpoints that the users are working on, giving them a seamless experience without the exposure to ransomware. And maybe it also just benefits to note before I hand over to Sizwe Mabanga that Google Docs isn't susceptible to ransomware. It's not something that can get encrypted because it's not a file in Google Drive. I like to say, picture a Google Doc or a Google Sheet as just another HTML website with a particular type of layout. So it is also impervious to ransomware. But with that, I'll hand over to Sizwe. He's also a collaboration engineer, but also a cloud architect, and he works in our DevOps department. So yeah, Sizwe, take it away.
Thank you, Nick. Let's just check first if I have click power. Do I have click power? I do. There we go. So guys, thank you for inviting us. This has been very informative. And as Nick has said over here, we put our Google foot forward, and he works mostly with Workspace. I'm more on the GCP side. I speak to your application architecture. So you've got a bunch of apps that are running your business, and you need to ensure that these things are secure and yet still able to operate in this fast changing modern space. And that's where Google comes in with very strong thinking around how to approach running such architecture. They very much lead with security. They believe that if you start your whole design by thinking in security, and then everything else will follow. So they have a very strong understanding of how to architect your organization within the cloud such that your networks and your projects, all of them are properly separated, and nobody can talk to anybody else unless they're properly authorized to talk to anybody else, because you've set it up correctly to begin with. You don't come in afterwards and try and retrospectively fix things, because that's where you actually will miss things. But if you start with security in mind, the way you set it up enables you to have full control going forward. And as with quite a few things, Google is actually a leader in this space. But what's for me quite interesting about how Google has operated is that Google has a bunch of applications that they themselves are putting out to market that require a lot of the same infrastructure that you would require when you are running a global or African-based infrastructure. And in running their own apps, which have upwards of 1 billion users, they've had to create various controls and applications and things and security approaches that protect themselves. And when Google Cloud presents these solutions to you, it's because they've consumed them themselves. They've used them to protect themselves from breaches. And yes, there have been a breach or two here, but actually Google's track record in terms of protecting user data is stellar. It's actually quite amazing, considering the amount of data that they have about us. If Google were to get hacked, really everybody would know what color underwear we all wear. So we actually are very happy that Google is this serious. They've walked a long journey since 2004, introducing all sorts of different ways to approach security. Some of my favorites are two-step verification. Two-step verification has allowed users to have a lot of power in terms of managing their own access to different ports. The trust now is a little bit more than we trust this person to keep their password secret. There's an extra step that really confounds hackers, because social engineering is no longer just enough. Now they have to actually trick this person into giving that second authorization, which is a lot of work for the social engineering types. Project Zero over here is actually also another powerful thing that I'll get into a little bit later, where it's a real conversation around where do we give trust, and trust is the core issue, I think, in security, cloud security, and we've tended in the past to give trust a little too easily, and we'll look a little bit at how Google has approached this trust problem further down. But their approach to security is quite comprehensive. They really want to get down to the hardware infrastructure level, go up to the service deployment level. So, all of your automation of your deployment of software. There's been situations, like you said, where software that shouldn't be in your environment is getting into your environment. That's ransomware. So with this service deployment section over here, what they've ensured is that you have a security level that speaks directly to what software is running where, and you having complete control over that. The storage services and identity management services always work really closely together to ensure that you always have a full control of who can see what. And Google's network communication is, so I'm not sure you're aware that about 40% of the world's internet communication is going over Google networks. And their security approach is actually very strong around encryption. They've even got new, their own approaches to encryption that really are quite different to how the rest of the world is doing it with how they create security keys. Google has introduced their own secure ways of making security keys, which also makes it a little bit harder for hackers to really try and circumvent their security measures. And again, as Nick was speaking to, the operational and device security protocols are also very strong, ensuring that whatever end devices people have are not the entry points into your network. Ah, there we go. Oh, wait, who clicked? That way, there we go. And just to go into depth about the hardware side of things, Google is very serious about this, to the point where they've actually introduced their own purpose-built chips that where they are now fully in control of security. So there is no man in the middle like a chipset creator elsewhere that may have a foothold in their architecture. They are down to the very hardware, fully in control of security. They are in control of how it encrypts its own data and interprets its own data. Therefore, really nobody can actually come in and sort of compromise Google's low-level security. This is just a visual representation of some of Google's interventions around how it stores its data, or your data for that matter, and ensures that that data is not accessible. I mean, one of the things that I was quite surprised about is that they mentioned disk shredding down here, which is to say that should a server that had been storing people's information now be decommissioned, they don't just throw it away, and they take that disk and physically shred it in such a way that even the best data recovery specialist couldn't try and piece it back together, which is how some data sets have been compromised by sort of going and reading disks that were decommissioned or thrown away, and a recovery specialist was able to read that data. Google goes to the extent of shredding that disk to that point where that's not even possible. And then there's hardware level encryption, and then there's also sharding, which is to say that even if somebody was to gain purchase on a single Google server and actually be able to read the data, decrypt data and read it, it would also still be problematic to try and actually figure out what this data is about, because it's sharded. Other pieces of the data are sitting on other servers elsewhere. So you don't have the big picture of the data. You've got this small little sliver of data. So again, an extra layer of protection just by a simple sharding. And then there's obfuscation at the application level. And the customer key is where Google is saying to you that you will always have control of who can see your data, because you are always in control of the keys. So there is the option to allow Google to control your keys for you, but there are very strong solutions within Google that allow you to control your keys and provide the keys to Google when it encrypts the data. And what that means is that even Google itself could not view your data should you be in full control of your keys. You could not they could not, there is no engineer sitting in Google that could, circumvent security and go and look at your data. You are in complete control. And it's quite similar. The stack is quite similar in the network protection side. They've actually, this elliptically encrypted link. This is that new encryption protocol that.
I'm very, very sorry to interrupt, and please do continue, but I do want to ask, looking at the time, if you perhaps can try and wrap up the presentation in 1 to 2 minutes, so we also have some time for questions.
Oh, well,
but please do finalize your sentence first. Sorry for interrupting.
No. I will go faster. I mean, I was getting into detail. I was getting excited about the encryption stuff over there. So, but let's just go straight to the meat of the story. The meat of the story is that Google advises that you trust nothing. Trust no sort of single point of access that then allows you to have purchase on other parts of the network, which is a divergence away from the traditional architectures where you have a VPN, and once a person is logged into a VPN, they have access into your network and have some sort of implicit trust. What is being said is that please ensure, and Google has now turned this into a product that actually turns this zero trust approach into something that you can actually subscribe to from Google, where they will set up your network as a zero trust network. What that means is that every time you want to have access from, whether you're an employee, a contractor, or a partner, you have a proxies that detect traffic from the internet and then enforces access policies based on identity and context. And what that means is that once you get access to a single, application or server, it does not mean you have access to anything else. In fact, if you want access to anything else, you will have to again be verified by the proxies, and it will check again that you have the right access. And another thing to point out is that Google is also very strong on making sure that it is compliant in all these ISO standards, and has also done so using global standards everywhere. But what it does mean is that here in Africa, if you choose to use Google Cloud, you've gone a long way to becoming compliant in some of the strongest controls and these guys. So you can see Google is completely POPI compliant and GDPR compliant. By the time you're compliant to these guys and your own processes are aligned to that, there really are very few local limitations that will stop you from actually putting your stuff in the cloud. And actually, now that's pretty much my presentation on my side. Dennis, did you want to wrap anything up on this?
No, I think you covered it well. So I suggest we give it to Josephine for the Q&A.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you so much, all three of you, for putting all this information into one big presentation. And I do think there is enough food for thought for everyone. And I also realize that we are running out of time, but I would like to see if we can maybe have one final question for those who are able to stay for 5 minutes longer. But before I go there, and before I hand over the online microphone to my colleague Thijs for that, I want to briefly ask everyone if you could fill in a very, very short questionnaire that we made. This is, of course, to get your thoughts on how you thought that this webinar went. But more importantly, we'd love to hear from you who of the speakers you would like to have a follow-up session with, or what are kind of the topics that you feel this is very much relevant for the country I am based in. So I will share it with you below. We will also share it per email. We promise it's very short. It won't take much of your time, but I think it would be very helpful also in deciding what could be the relevant next steps for this webinar. It would be very helpful if you could fill that in. Then I would kindly like to thank you, all of our 7 speakers today. We covered a lot of different topics. I'm also happy to see that we actually had some nice discussions also on the Q&A. So also thank you, of course, first to the attendees for posing your questions, and then for the speakers to already allow for some discussions and for sharing your thoughts on the chat. I will send you the link for the questionnaire, and then I am looking at my colleague Thijs now to see if there is maybe one question you feel like we should still highlight and we should take 1 or 2 minutes extra for.
Thanks, Josephine. Yeah, I would like to thank first of all the speakers. I'm very impressed how you managed to address so much information in such a short time. And I also would like to ask all the attendees to, if you have any further questions, please put them into the chat. And I will read them out loud and ask all the panelists to respond. And I've seen that there is, but most of the questions have already been answered by all of you. But let me go through the one that is not answered. So Ishimi asked from, hi Nick. Just a quick one on DLP. How do you balance DLP control and monitoring with the idea of privacy? Again, how do you think on-premises DLP without considering WFH conditions as a result of COVID?
Yeah, thanks,
Thijs.
And yeah, sure. And thanks for the question. How I would approach that is DLP applies to your work email and to your work drive documents. So with the Google model of working, everything is in the browser, and the DLP works through the control panel. So every time I share a document or I send an email, it should be work related. And then your DLP rules are really looking for content that shouldn't be shared through your work account, like your, personal contact details or financial information or medical information or particular projects that the external world should not yet be aware of. So it's not controlling the entire device and the personal space of the user. For example, I'm at home, I'm working on a Windows machine, but our DLP only works on my work Gmail account and my work Google Drive account. So it's kind of separating the personal from the work. And we generally advise that as well when people move over to Workspace and we train the users, we would tell them this looks and functions exactly like your personal Gmail account with additional enterprise features, but really do separate those worlds. Just because you're working in the cloud now, don't all of a sudden start doing personal work through your work email account. Keep the work in the work account and keep the personal stuff in the personal account. And that accounts for not just the DLP in Google, but also the mobile device management and the endpoint management, where you can completely split your work and your personal life. So on one device, you can do personal stuff, whether it's mobile or laptop, and you can do work stuff. And not everything is monitored across the board. I hope that answers your question.
I think it does. Thank you so much, Nick. So if there are any other questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. We will also provide you with all the contact details of the speakers, which allows you to contact them directly and engage with them. And please fill in the short questionnaire. So I don't see any further questions popping up. So I would like to thank all of the speakers and all the attendees for being present here today. So then we will close this session formally, but informally you can stick around and ask for any further questions as of this moment. Yes. Josephine, do you want to say the final closing words?
Thank you. Yes, and thank you again to all the speakers. Thank you for all the attendees to take the time and join us today to learn more about cybersecurity. And we're very much looking forward to hear from you, to stay in touch. And we have put also our email addresses here. We will of course share the email addresses of all the speakers today. But if you wish to learn more about the TRAIDE program, about the work that we do in collaboration with the Netherlands Embassy here in Rwanda, please feel free to reach out to us using the emails below. I think also here, we will keep the webinar open for a little bit in case there are people who indeed want to share something. And otherwise, I thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to continuing the conversation and to stay in touch. Thank you and have a great day. I think this is the moment where in a real life event we would have a theme song. We unfortunately cannot do this, so please feel free to drop off.
Yeah, I think, yeah, so for the ones that want to stay along, so an interesting article has been published by The Economist, which states that there is a strong knowledge asymmetry, and it's often very difficult to assess for a potential client to what extent a cybersecurity product will work for them. And I was curious if the panelists could say something about this and what kind of advice they would give to companies that are present in this call, what to do. This is a question raised by Auke Boeren. Is there any of the panelists that would like to respond to this?
Yeah, I already typed quite a long answer, I think, in the chat for this particular question. But look, with proprietary software, you really have to trust their marketing departments, which you know, it's up to you whether or not you want to believe that. What I can say is I'm a pen testing company, and we are regularly hacking all kinds of customers, whether it's, you know, banks or, you know, governments or, you know, or even smaller companies. And we run into commercial security products all the time, monitoring products, you know, all different kinds of firewalls and filtering tools and everything. What I can say is when my hackers are being quiet and careful, a customer has never detected us. And I'm saying this having run a 7-year-old company. Obviously, if we have time constraints and I'm being really noisy and we're just like trying to run, just, you know, do things as quickly as possible and run noisy scanning engines, that's the moment when you would perhaps notice. Additionally, if we were trying to exfiltrate large amounts of data, that would probably also be a moment maybe when you would be likely to notice, but that would only be if we were being really fast and a bit sloppy. So anyway, I'm a bit pessimistic about the majority of monitoring tools. I think a whole lot of them are just a lot of marketing talk and they don't work as well as they say. That being said, gradually raising the bar in the ways that you can is always helpful. So I'm not saying throw up your hands and don't use these tools, but what I'm saying is I just wouldn't pay too much for them. Now, there's a whole lot of open source that is out there, and the majority of proprietary solutions anyways are based off of open source underneath the hood. You know, you can take the time to try and customize that to your own personal context. You can get really, really far with open source. My entire company runs off of open source, you know, you know, if it works for us and we're a security company, and most likely it would also work for you. But certainly in the African context, I mean, you don't have a whole lot of money, I think, to be throwing around towards commercial licenses with commercial vendors. The thing is, though, if you do need help, if you do need commercial support or trainings, there usually are open source friendly vendors who are also willing to come in and provide you with extra help with configuring it, setting it up, training you on it. So you can still get that kind of commercial support for open source. But the nice thing is you're not locked in. So, you know, if you decide to stop paying that open source friendly vendor and they leave, no worries, you can just like swap them out with a different one that you like better later on, or you can just continue figuring it out by yourself. And that's a huge difference between open source and proprietary solutions. Oftentimes with proprietary solutions, the moment you stop paying, you lose access to that tool, or you lose access to any data feeds that are related to that tool. So yeah, I mean, definitely in Africa, you know, use the stuff that's free. And it's not, you know, and if people tell you not to, it's not because it's not good, it's just because they're probably trying to sell you something.
Okay, thank you so much, Melanie. Are there any others that would like to give some closing words as speakers, or shall we move on? Because I don't see any new questions popping up in the chat. No, then I think we can, I would like to thank you again, and yeah, we look forward to match you to the participants. You will be contacted from our side.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Good weekend coming up. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.